not talking about the best of them. They're just talking about the rest of them. Not the worst parts, but the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan. I'm joined as always by my co-host, the one and only, the jolly man himself, Mr. Andrew Williams. It makes it sound like you're Santa Claus. I don't know. Andrew, how are we doing today?
You know.
Andrew, I do know, because I get that answer from you about 90% of the time. I don't know why I ask at the top of every episode, to be honest with you, but glad things are still going, with you. Andrew, let's not waste any time. This is a very special month for us on this podcast. Normally what we do is we break down movies that are poorly suited upon release and challenge ourselves. Only talk about the things we like, what the movies does well, hashtag positivity podcast. But for the month of December, we got a special thing going on here. We're featuring a new guest on our podcast every single week. And we have asked these guests to give us a gift. It's gift giving season. Why not? Give us a gift. Give us something. So every guest is bringing their own movie to talk about. It doesn't have to be poorly received. It can be whatever they want. And here, I have a gift from this week's guest. Steven of the Great Game Debate podcast is going to be here in studio breaking down the movie that he selected. We've been fortunate enough to be guests on the Great Game Debate podcast. Steven is now coming over to join us, but let's not waste any more time. Andrew, let's open this up. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, what do we got here? Oh. All right. Andrew, this is a movie called Green Street Hooligans. Andrew, what the hell is this?
I don't know.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I guess I can't say I've never heard of this movie. Technically, I've heard of it because we've talked about the director before, and this is sort of what puts that director on the map, but that's about the extent of what I know about this movie. Green Street Hooligans. It seems to also be called Green Street in some markets. Is a movie released September 9th of 2005 in the UK, but it is straight to home video again in most markets. I guess I don't need to ask you your history with this movie because you've never seen it, right?
No.
Like me? No. Zero. Well, this is Steven. This is an exciting gift. A movie we have no experience with. We get to jump in and talk about all the positives and everything that we like. Like I said, the movie's released in 2005, made on a budget of, I don't know, because I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page and I don't see it. It says the box office return is $4.3 million. Again, this is mostly a home video DVD release. I know it has built up quite a following. And again, the reason I even know what this is because it is directed by Lexi Alexander, alum of the show. Talked about her back on our Punisher Warzone podcast in episode. And this is the movie that puts her on the map. It gets her the Punisher Warzone job. And Lexi Alexander, I'm sure we praised her plenty back then. I'm going to do it again now. She's awesome. She's a badass. She's crazy talented and a number of different walks of life. I'm excited to jump into the movie that, again, puts her on the map.
You and me both, man.
Andrew, are you... To me, hooligan is just like like a prankster, like a goofball, like a I don't know. Can't think of many other like synonyms, but it doesn't really mean much to me. But hooligan seems to be a very specific thing overseas, specifically a football hooligan. And it looks like Lexi Alexander herself spent some time in this, I don't know, culture? What do you even call it? This lifestyle at some point. Was able to draw off a lot of
whatever.
personal experiences and poured into this movie. You have any experience with hooliganism, Andrew?
Yeah, you know me, man. I get into fights all the time. This definitely feels like it's a little bit more of a UK thing, with just how intense people can get about football, as they call it over there. Yeah, I mean, in this instance, hooliganism is very much describing almost like reckless vandalism, almost. Like that's kind of like what's kind of being more described here. Now, it's one of those words that just over time has softened in its meaning, and so now you say hooligan and you're just like a troublemaker, like, which I guess, hooligans are troublemakers. It's just they're making a lot more trouble than you might assume they are. But yeah, I mean, and I say that, but then like over here, when the Vancouver Canucks lost the 2011 Stanley Cup, those fans set that town on fire. Like it's one of those things where, like, I guess, you sit there and say, oh, we don't have that kind of thing here, but then a sports team loses and people destroy their city. And it's like, cool, what a great message we've sent. That the entire sanity of our city hinges on this.
Sometimes the sports team wins and they destroy the city.
Yep. It's a lose-lose, it feels like. Dude, are sports terrible?
Do they bring out the worst in all of us? Andrew, we talked about the director already. Lexi Alexander also has a screenplay credit alongside Dougie Brimson and Josh Shalov. I've looked into these guys a little bit. Can't tell you much. Dougie does have a few other credits and seems to be an all-around filmmaker. Also does some producing as well as writing. Is also an author. Has authored several books and has apparently quite a bit about hooliganism, which is a real word. But they seem to be a hooliganism expert, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, not familiar with either one of these guys. Beyond this, you look at Dougie Brimson, he's got a lot of nonfiction to his name, like you said, largely about football. I mean, I think literally every single one of these is about football. And then he does have some novels that he's written, even as recently as 2020. He's got some movie screenwriting that he's still done outside Green Streets, including apparently one just a couple years ago. So apparently, yeah, like you said, familiar with the culture, familiar with the circles, and yeah, definitely, apparently the kind of person you want for a screenplay about this, because even by the time this movie's coming out, he's already written, 6 or 7 books about hooliganism and football and all sorts of things. So I would say he's a little bit of an expert.
Well, Andrew, maybe our guest Steven might be a little more knowledgeable about hooliganism, and maybe watching this movie will help us learn a little bit as well. So let's dive into this world and bring in our guest and break down everything we like, all the positives about Green Street Hooligans. You ready?
Yes.
We are podcasting with positivity.
When an American named Matt is kicked out of Harvard, he travels to England to stay with his skin and blister. After Buster Keaton, her husband's one and the other Pete, he takes to running the Ain't It a Treats with him in his firm known as the Green Street Elite. When the gang gets into some Barney rubble, Matt needs to determine which direction his life needs to escape a flow. Everybody with me?
Perfect. No problem.
I found a Cockney translator online, and I copy and pasted my synopsis in there. I have no idea what I just said, and I wrote the thing. And that's the experience watching this movie. I understood 60% of the words, and then of that 60%, I understood what 30% of that meant. But luckily, there's a lot of visuals to help me along the way. Andrew. Andrew, we got to acknowledge we have a special guest with us, though, before we go any further. Snickering there in the background is the one and only Steven of the Great Game Debate podcast. Steven, thank you so much for being in the studio with us today and bringing us this gift, bringing us this movie for December. But welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a fan for a long time. We just somehow synced up over Discord over the years, and then have had multiple collaborations. But finally I get to bring down the quality of your shows. It's going to be exciting.
No, we certainly appreciate you being here, and like I said, bringing us this gift. We've Andrew and I have been fortunate enough to guest over on your show over there. You guys do great work. Hope everybody's checked out your show. In fact, our guest appearance ended up being a bonus episode in our feed. So like I said, previous collaborations all over the place, but happy to finally have you here. And in the intro here, Andrew and I already talked about our history with this film, which is none. We had never seen it. We're aware of it, but never saw it. Personally, I don't know if I ever would have got around to watching it if it weren't for you bringing it to our show. So first thing I got to ask is, what is your history with this film, one? And two, we invited you to be a guest. We told you, bring us a gift. Bring us any movie you want. Why was Green Street Hooligans the one that you chose?
Green Street Hooligans was the one that I chose because it definitely reminded me of when I was the most invested in film and the most collaborative in film, which is kind of the spice of this episode. So I have the DVD. I didn't remember if I had it or not. So when I was going to watch it for the research, I realized I hadn't watched it in about 15 years' time. But saw that it came out in 2004. I feel like I would have watched it in about 2006 maybe. And the thing that really made me want to choose it is because of how it was one of those films where people would watch it. It was like a straight to DVD kind of thing. And I met a bunch of people at someone's 18th birthday party in the city, and we'd all seen it. And we were all singing "We're Forever Blowing Bubbles" while just drunken hooligans in the street. So there's just this time and a place where it just reminds me of the stupid shit that we got it up to when we were like 18-year-old dickheads. Sorry, I've already exceeded the bleep counter already, but like,
No worries.
the Barneys that we would get into while having a bubble, it was really good. So I really wanted to see how it held up, and it was cool to rewatch because my life has changed so much from when I was 20 years old. 2 kids, 35 years old now. It's such a different film to watch, and I was very taken aback by how I felt at the end of the film. So yeah, I thought that was a great gift to share.
Man, it is. I understand exactly where you're coming from. Revisiting movies. I mean, last month I think we had a good example with Revenge of the Sith, which watching it when I was younger, I was like, oh, it's badass. Anakin's finally being evil. And I watch it now, I'm like, this is sad. Like, kids are dead. What is going on? And, this movie took me right back to, I had texted Andrew this. I was like, if I had watched this movie at the right time in my life, it'd be like in my top 10. Like, I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, watching it now for the first time, but certainly I could feel how much I would have gravitated to it if I discovered it, say, like in high school. That's a period where I was watching, Reservoir Dogs for the first time. Snatch, I saw that in high school and fell in love with it. This is right up that alley of, early Guy Ritchie movies like Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. So I get that, totally revisiting it. I've shared before on the podcast. Again, like you're saying, high school might have been when I've consumed the most new movies. Like I would watch, I don't know, like 600 movies I'd never seen before in any given year. And I would watch like I remember really liking Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah.
I watched it like once a month, and like,
yes,
I couldn't sit through that movie now. Like like coming into it now, it would be horrible. So it's just it's wild how that changes over time.
Yeah, I was
I
massive.
can't
edge,
imagine watching
edgelord.
Requiem for
Yeah.
a Dream fun.
It's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
film.
It's,
But it's
pretty
not
funny. Like when a fridge
It's
is
not
trying to
funny at
eat
all.
someone, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a good spot. Train Spotting, I saw that a ton.
Yeah.
And another movie I was reminded of watching this. It just it doesn't. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it
It's
is.
like
I'm
a
trying to dive
snapshot of
into.
a specific time. Like it's like watching this movie
100%.
isn't just about like the movie itself. It takes you back to the place you were at when you saw
Yeah.
it. And I think
Sure.
I think that's how it is. Like hashtag PP. I think Boondock Saints is like that a lot. I struggle with that movie and the people that are like fervent fans of it, but I think that is a large part of it. Is it's these mid-aughts type movies. So a lot of us are getting to that. Like I was just graduating high school when this came out, or I was just starting college. So literally 18 years old, 19 years old. You're starting to watch as many movies as you can, digest as much as you can, and there's these particular movies that are just these particular moments that it's not just the movie itself. It's reminding you of where your life was at that time. And we've talked about
100%.
like how your relationship with things changes. And so there are movies I watch now and it's not so much a snapshot. I watch, like you said, Revenge of the Sith is a good example of I watch it now and I'm like, well, this was depressing. Like, good Lord, like this is awful.
Yeah.
But then there's other movies that I watch and like Mallrats is probably a good example for me. Like I know that Mallrats is not a movie that like if somebody
Yeah.
my age watched Mallrats now, they would probably be like, this is dumb. Like
I-
Chris.
yeah.
But watching it reminds me of the place I was in my life when I saw it. And yeah, it takes me back.
I've put Mallrats on for an audience, and everyone was like, after about 30 minutes, wanted to turn it off, and I'm like, damn.
That's me. I didn't see Mallrats until literally 2-3 years ago. Like I saw some other Kevin Smith movies, never watched Mallrats. I watch it now as an adult, and I was like, these are a bunch of horrible. No one's likable. Like, what is? I did not connect with
terrible.
it whatsoever.
Like everything is bad about it, but it's so good.
but I can understand you're coming to it in high school, your younger years, and you're seeing for possibly the first time main characters that are into comic books and making references that you just don't see. I get it, but once you've aged out of it or come to it late, it's a time and place thing. 1000%. But
And I was just going to say, Mallrats connects to this film, actually, which is awesome.
Oh,
with one
how's
of the
that?
actors. With Claire Forlani,
Claire Forlani. Yep.
who plays Shannon. And Shannon Doherty is in Mallrats as well. So there you go. It's just all cyclical.
There it is. We're gonna get into it. I mean, I can't wait to talk about this movie. I've got a lot to say. I watched it this morning. Steven, I sent you a picture. Halfway through, I'm like, oh, I gotta have a beer. Like I can't just watch these guys drink this whole movie and not have one. So I did some day drinking today, watching this movie. Had a great time. But before we get to the scenes, you know what we gotta do? We gotta talk about this cast, starting with the high point, best casting, best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, I want you to kick us off here. Who is getting the Mark Strong Award for Green Street Hooligans?
This is a tough one. Not necessarily. I like a lot of the people in this movie.
Okay.
There's a lot of fun performances.
You walked that back so quickly. This is the tough one. Oh, not really.
Tough one. Well, in the sense that, like, I think there's a lot of people that are providing exactly the type of performance this movie needs. And and so I think there's a lot of people that are bringing a good performance here that escalates, or doesn't escalate, but elevates the film. So, but I am going to go with Charlie Hunnam as Pete Dunham. Basically our lead of the Hooligans, the leader of the Green Street Elites, the brother-in-law of our main character, Matt Buckner, played by Elijah Wood. I just really like this character. I like Charlie Hunnam a lot. He's definitely somebody that has made his inroads in certain geek circles due to things like Sons of Anarchy, and more recently with stuff like Pacific Rim. But I like him a lot. He shows up in a lot of in a few of Guillermo del Toro's movies. He started showing up in some of the Guy Ritchie stuff. So he's definitely in those circles. Like, I mean, he was in a movie I really liked with Guy Ritchie called The Gentleman, which there's a more recent movie that's kind of like a snapshot of a time. I put that on because that might have been the last movie I saw before COVID started. It was a very
Not
very
Sonic the Hedgehog.
No. I don't
Wait, I
think
thought
so.
Bloodshot was the last one you saw before COVID.
Bloodshot was after COVID had technically started.
Okay.
The theater was about to shut down, and so thankfully, the nature of it being Bloodshot means that I was practicing social distancing without even trying. Didn't. Anyway, The Gentleman was really, really good. So I like Charlie Hunnam. I like him a lot. I like his performance here as this kind of not really underdog, but just this character that's got a little bit more to him than you might guess at the first glance. Obviously, find out he's a teacher and he teaches physical education and also history. The kind of legacy he's got with the Green Street Elite, with his brother having been the former leader of it, and him trying to kind of maintain that or try to bring this group back to its kind of prestige, such as it is, while dealing with its past. A past we don't really find out too much about until much later in the film. But throughout the whole time, I think Charlie Hunnam is just fun to watch. I think he's given a good performance and is one of many people, I think, doing exactly what this movie is asking for. And the movie is all the better for it.
Dude, this is like a star-making performance. Like, he's just fully formed from the first scene. I loved this character. I'm not super familiar with Charlie Hunnam's work. I know Sons of Anarchy was really big. I never watched it. I've seen Pacific Rim. I don't really have any Charlie Hunnam performances that stand out. This is the first leading thing that I can really recall seeing him in, and he's awesome. I mean, he just jumps off the screen. He walks the way he walks with that like swagger. Always got his collar popped. Certainly, this is gonna sound backhanded. I don't mean it to be, but just kind of throwing it back to what we were talking about earlier. This would be like 16-year-old me watching this would be like, that guy's a total badass. That he's everything a man should be, right? Like,
I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's awesome. But no, he's so good. I mean, like his first scene, he just like stumbles into his brother's house. He's like, yeah, I got into some trouble. I lost my watch and my wallet. And then you hear a horn honk outside. He's like, oh, there's a taxi outside. And his brother like knows what he has to do. He has to go pay the taxi for him. It's great. I mean, we'll get more into scenes later, but yeah, I absolutely love this performance. And to make someone who is being very violent throughout the movie be so endearing and likable is no easy task. Because we'll go through the casting of the characters, but like his right-hand man in the gang, for example, I don't like that guy the way I like Pete. He's not endearing. So it's a fine line to walk to be able to pull that off, but he absolutely nails it. Also getting my Mark Strong award in case that wasn't clear.
Beauty.
Yeah, so I think that it's a consensus on that one. Like, this was my introduction to Charlie Hunnam, and again, he just had star power. It was just like, it was so obvious. Same with like watching Attack the Block and seeing John Boyega and being like, this kid's got something, you know? And I've seen a lot of those films. I think of Dr. Parnassus with Andrew Garfield as well. Like, just when an actor gets on the screen and just chews it up instantly, and that's it. Like, these pristine white trainers or skate shoes or whatever you like to call them from your neck of the woods, and that belies the violence that is going to come. Like, I was wearing white DCs back in 2007. Like, I'd brush them and stuff with a toothbrush, all that sort of jazz. Like, I love that look. And yeah, he 100%. It's just, there are some fantastic actors, and there's a really good supporting cast, and so many people from like Band of Brothers and stuff like that in the scenery there. But man, what an outstanding like first performance.
Is this his first film role? Is it?
I'm not sure.
Let's take a look at this filmography here.
Charlie Hunnam?
Yeah, a few credits before this. Certainly,
Yeah.
It looks like his first starring role for sure. But man, like I said, what you got to imagine the bigger roles he gets later. A lot of those casting directors are are basing it off of his performance here.
And again, you brought up about the fact that he is also a teacher and stuff. I love this film. You know, there's probably not that many lines of dialogue all in all. The amount of visual storytelling that goes into showing that, unlike a lot of gang movies, these people live their lives outside of the violence. Like, it is a bit of that Fight Club vibe of like, but you actually see them always in, like, most of the time they're in work gear, and you go, oh my god, this person just got off from work and now he's gonna just go enact some crazy riot, or, you know, just do something absolutely abhorrent and then just go back to work the next day, like with the bruises, kind of like you see with Jared Leto or whatever in Fight Club. Like, it's really confronting in that way.
We'll talk about more scenes, but I love that aspect of this movie. Like, I mean, before the final brawl, we see like every main character at their home, putting their clothes on, taking a deep breath, kissing their girlfriend, and walking. Like, I love that aspect about this. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, though. We got some cast to go through here. Like the arguably the star of this movie, or certainly the audience surrogate for this world of, I forgot what they're even called. Firms.
Hooligans.
Is Elijah Wood as Matt Buckner. He's the gentleman that gets kicked out of Harvard. He takes the fall for his roommate's stash of drugs that was found in his dorm room, and he kind of is like a pushover in that deal. He just kind of accepts that, okay, yeah, this guy's more connected than I am. It's not worth fighting. He's drifting through life. 2 months before he's able to graduate Harvard, he's kicked out, ends up with his sister in England, and into this world with the Hooligans. Fantastic performance. I mean, Elijah Wood, he's great. I love this guy's career. We alum of the show. We had a chance to talk about him back on Deep Impact, and he seemed to have like a pretty normal standard child actor to adult actor filmography, things like Radio Flyer, Deep Impact, like I just mentioned. And then, like, he gets Lord of the Rings, and it's the biggest movies ever. He never has to worry about money again. And I feel like ever since then, he just does whatever the hell he wants. Yeah. Tons of small indie projects, tons of really weird stuff. He did that TV show with, like, the man in the dog suit. Like, yeah. It's just, he seems to be just doing literally whatever the hell he wants, whatever he finds interesting. And, you know, that's, gotta imagine that's most actors' dreams. But he's great here. I think, I mean, no one's going to outshine Charlie Hunnam in this movie, but this role in particular, he's got to be kind of the, he's a little wimpy and bookish and kind of gets drawn into this violent world. So the nerd of the movie isn't going to be like the standout, but he plays the part so well. I mean, this, Elijah Wood plays the nerdiness up very well. Whenever he starts spiking his hair a little bit and getting tougher, you kind of go, all right, buddy. Well, okay. Yeah. But that's kind of his role. Pete kind of sees him as like a younger brother or someone to take a little bit of pity on, show him the ropes. And I love their dynamic, sort of, again, surrogate sibling dynamic that they form. But yeah, Elijah's great.
It is very weird to realize that this is post Lord of the Rings. That was definitely a moment for me. I was like, oh, this is like not just
like right after, right?
This is like right at, like, Return of the King is 03 and this is 05, but like he probably shot this not long after that third Lord of the Rings came out, which is just wild to think about. And I think the performance is really good. Like you said, he's really good at that kind of shy, kind of withdrawn role, especially as he gets there. But I do think as the movie goes on, he does exude more confidence. Like by the time we get to that last scene, I think there's definitely a change in the character that you can see from him. So I think the performance definitely evolves as we go on. There's definitely moments where it's like he feels like, still kind of a fish out of the water. And I think that's kind of the novelty of it. The idea, I think, of being in these gangs is, these firms rather, is not so much that you're the best fighter or the toughest guy, but just that you stick with it. You're in. You're basically everybody's backup at that point. And I think he does a good job as this movie goes on and he kind of evolves. And I love that last scene where he finally goes back and takes his life back, basically. I think it's a good full circle for the character. And good stuff.
Yeah, I do like that his evolution doesn't go from just Peter Parker to Bully Maguire, but it has a little bit of that, especially with when he spikes his hair and sort of thing like that. You got to remember again, it's 2004. We were still spiking our hair. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it definitely feels like he's gaining more confidence. So many comparisons to Fight Club, but I think he says one line where it's like, when you realize you're not made of glass, then you're not really living until you're pushing yourself to the limit. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can see that. Like that adrenaline rush is so believable.
Leo Gregory said that weird. Leo Gregory plays Bover. I just watched this. How do you say this? Bova.
Just end with an A.
Plays Bava. Of course. Bova. Of course. Bovever. Bava. Now, this is Pete's right-hand man I was talking about earlier, who's just as involved in this lifestyle as Pete, but we don't quite like this guy. I mean, he is very wary of outsiders, as they all are, but doesn't like Matt from the beginning. Seems a little extra dickish to him. And it, eventually takes that one step too far later in the movie. But this guy, Elijah Wood's character Matt says in the beginning, like, he's never been in a fight. Bava looks like he's been in 3 fights before lunch every single day. This guy looks like he's scrapped every day of his life, and that seems to be the case. All he has is this firm. But this dude is... gangly is the the word that comes to mind to describe him. Part that he plays super well. It's very interesting because, like, these are all great actors, but you couldn't cast Leo in the role of Pete and Charlie in the role of Bava. Let me make sure I'm saying this right. Right? It's like he has just the right energy to be this. I'm trying not to sound too low life. I'm not trying not to sound too negative, but the guy in the group that's maybe a little bit on edge, or the one that you don't trust. I mean, he just exudes that energy. And I'm not familiar with his other work, but I did scroll through his filmography and I looked at the posters for all the movies, and it's like, yeah, I can see him in all these films. They're all street level crime gang hooligan films. It's like, that this guy has surely made a career out of a certain type of role.
Along with his haircut and jacket, he just reminds me of a violent Noel or Liam Gallagher. I never remember which brother it is, but he's one, because the Oasis brothers are dicks, and he is just 100% dick all the time.
Yeah, that's good.
That's very accurate. Yeah, and like I said, it's a tough word, but he's basically there's a little bit of grit on this guy. He's been through some stuff. In a way that it doesn't feel like any of the other characters have been. But I think he plays this role to perfection. He doesn't like Matt from the start. Eventually thinks he's got the whole thing figured out, and it turns out maybe not. So it ends up going and leading to some big consequences. I think it's a great performance. Yeah, I looked through his filmography, and there's definitely not a lot of stuff here that I recognize. There is a movie called The Hooligan Factory, which looks like it's literally a parody film of films like this. So, so he brought it all full circle, I guess. But yeah, and he has actually announced that alongside Dougie Brimson, who's a co-writer on this, that they have written their own script for a direct follow-up to this film. So we'll see whatever becomes of that.
Mark Warren plays Steve Dunham. This is Pete's older brother. And for most of this movie, I mean, we see Mark, he's married to Matt's sister. They have a newborn child. They have a nice house. And he seems to sort of be putting up with his younger brother. It seems like the dynamic is that he's on the straight and narrow. He's the good son, and his younger brother's the screw up. But of course, by the end, it comes to light that Steve is known as the Major. He's the founder of the Green Street Elite. He used to be in that lifestyle before getting out. So it suddenly makes a lot of sense why he's putting up or taking care of his younger brother. He can't pass too much judgment because that's the life that he himself came from. And where his story goes is wild. We'll get to it in scenes. But it was an interesting character as the layers kind of pull back. I thought he seemed a little off-putting is not the right word, but he seemed like he wasn't too interested in Matt kind of being involved in the life and wanted just nothing to do with him. But by the end, sort of comes around to kind of take pity on him. He steps in to try to help, and ultimately pays the price for it.
No, I like this character a lot because when you're first introduced to him, there is this kind of he's not super likable. Like when he first interacts with his wife, you're just kind of like, this guy seems a little, and then he doesn't seem to be a huge fan of his brother. But I think originally the idea is he thinks that having Matt around is going to help his brother chill out a little bit. I think that's kind of the idea, is that, oh, well, if Matt's there, he's going to be on a good behavior. He's not going to pull him into any fights. They're not going to do anything like that. I think that's the idea, is that the presence of Matt might actually help his brother kind of step away from this. And that ultimately ends up being the opposite, as Matt kind of falls deeper and deeper in, going so far as to getting the tattoo and everything. And then, like you said, when it looks like it's all about to blow up, he jumps in and tries to help, and it does end up, let's just say, causing some issues. And we find out his history with the group and why he left, and it's a tragic story.
Yeah, it's so interesting seeing Mark Warren in this film, especially after watching Band of Brothers and stuff, and he plays Blythe in Band of Brothers, and such a different role there, where he's playing the older brother in this, so he's got all the history of the film's lore in this movie. So yeah, I really love just seeing him play this very different character, and there's just, I understand, like, he's definitely that stereotypical too busy white collar businessman, like, yeah, I'm rich, or I'm well off, or whatever, and I've got these tickets to this show, and I pretty much have, hello to you, I don't really care, I've got stuff going on in my life, and that's like, what it seems like. But then every interaction with Pete, there's just this hint of implied violence behind everything that he says. And then, like, when you get into the conversations at the Abbey later on, and he gets to really chew up the words that he speaks about his past, is he really comes into his own.
And Claire Furlani plays Shannon Dunham. We discussed earlier, she's in Mallrats. Alum of this show for her role in Mystery Men. First thing I probably think of her is Meet Joe Black, which is a movie I've seen a number of times. Always enjoyed. Haven't watched it in 20 years. Everyone seems to hate it. I'm kind of scared to rewatch it. Maybe it's actually awful, but certainly remember her from that role. And every time she's on screen here, I'm just like, this is a striking looking person. Like, she is, respectfully, of course, just stunning. But I like her role here. She seems to be inconsequential a bit in the beginning. Like, she's our main character's sister. Looks like they're gonna, he's gonna stay with her, but he very quickly kind of dismisses her to go hang out with Pete, and she kind of falls out of the film for quite a bit. But when the violence starts ramping up and people start getting hurt, she is really torn between worlds, makes a tough decision to leave the country for the safety of her and her child, and gets caught up in some mess herself at the end. And when, I don't know why I'm trying to avoid spoilers, or we're going to spoil everything already, but when her husband's in the hospital and her reaction to Pete for getting him into that is, it's great. It's tough to watch, but it's man, you really feel the pain that she's in.
And I do really like that scene too, because, like, he just takes it. Like, he knows that, like, there's no justification or no explanation or no excuse for any of this at this point. So it's very well done.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I believe that for how few lines of dialogue she actually has, every single line is delivered very well, with a lot of emotion and implied relationship with all the characters, whether it's positive relationship or just negative relationship. She really inhabits this role, and I feel like she is one of the really solid driving forces and barometers for how you should feel about what is happening and conspiring in the film. Yeah, she's fantastic.
There are plenty of other actors we can talk about, some more people in the gang, and a certain member of a different firm that I would like to talk about when we get to scenes. But I think we can start to move on to our favorite scenes of this movie. But before I jump into that, I want to do a quick kind of barometer check here. Adept eagle-eared listeners right now are probably catching that, Steven, you have a different accent than Andrew and myself. So you are coming to us live from Australia, correct? And is
yes, I am
born
part
and
of the
raised
Commonwealth. Yes, born and raised in Australia. Just been in the southeastern part of Australia all my life, and happily safe and enjoying life there.
That's good. What is your relationship with soccer/football?
That's a great question because yes, it definitely was soccer for the longest time. I like to pronounce because we say footy for our Australian rules. So
yeah, I watch footy. I know
it's fun. Well, they're talking about NRL, whereas I'm in the south, so I'm talking about AFL. So again, there's
okay,
exactly. So definitely 2006 World Cup, I think, really got almost everyone collectively into staying up till 4 a.m. in the morning watching the World Cup, and that was when my school really got into football, and that's the way I pronounce it to distinguish it between footy and football. It's you got to say the ball in a really English way.
But wait, what is the difference between footy and football then?
A completely different sport.
Wait, it's a different sport? All right.
I
didn't think I'd be going down.
Familiar with Australian rules football?
No, I didn't know that was... No.
We play on a cricket oval.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
You play on a massive cricket oval, 18 players to a side, and we're running and kicking and doing a lot more football than the NFL do. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, American football makes no sense. It's called football. We can agree on that.
There's this really good joke I like in a movie. There's this football movie I like called Necessary Roughness with Scott Bakula and a bunch of others. But at one point, they're trying to fit out this team with any players they can find, because the way you know the movie is fiction is a Texas college football team is all expelled after a scandal, and they're all actually held accountable. That's how you know it's not real. But so they're literally finding anybody they can. And at one point, on one day they're practicing, this Australian guy shows up and basically says, "Oh yeah, I used to play Australian rules football down under." And they're like, "Oh, should we get you some pads?" And he's like, "No, pads are not part of my game, man. Like, he's not pads. This guy doesn't play with pads because Australian rules football. There's no pads." So he takes the ball, runs it, gets absolutely obliterated by somebody, and lays out on the ground. And the coach runs up and he's like, when he wakes up getting some pads, and the assistant coach is like, "No way, pads might hurt his game."
Well, okay, history lesson here. Okay, so my history with soccer is I'm a dumb American. I don't like it, and I think it's boring to watch. And I know this is no hot take, but there's a lot of sports where on TV it just doesn't get across, and you got to see it live, right? I could never sit and watch 500 laps in NASCAR, but I've been to live races, exhilarating, love it. Hockey, same thing. Didn't get into it on TV, but started going to some games, absolutely love it live. Soccer, no. I've been to a live game. I don't connect with the sport. I don't know. Culturally, it's just not a thing here, So going into this movie, I was wondering how much of it I was gonna bump against or relate to or not get, but I'm shocked by how little soccer is actually in this movie. For a minute, 30 minutes in, I'm like, are they gonna do an entire movie about soccer culture without showing soccer? Because that's kind of cool. There is a little bit of soccer match shown in here, but really, again, it's about the culture. And I guess that was ultimately the question I want to get at, is like, is the soccer culture? I mean, I'm sure you're not fighting in the streets down there in Australia, yourself, but is it this rabid of a fan base? Is this something that you're?
It's definitely not as bad as European riots and stuff, but definitely it is. It's just a weird thing, and I just think it's like it's like watching GSE and just getting hyped up on the violence, or Fight Club or whatever, and getting hyped up on the violence. It's like the expectation that you're meant to bring flares to the match, and they do, and they just they'll just start setting off flares. It's just for some reason, the culture around football or the EPL or La Liga or whatever it is like, oh, you got to bring freaking big flares and rockets and shit and get in a fight. It's just like, yeah, we definitely don't have the same level of riots, but yeah, definitely, yeah, like when we were watching the South African World Cup, and there was the vuvuzelas. It's just like disruption is a part of the environment.
Andrew, big soccer guy?
No, I watch hockey.
Okay.
I like my murder sports to be on ice with knife shoots. That's my preference. No, I don't have any issues with soccer. Like, I'll watch it if I go somewhere and they're watching soccer. Like, I basically have no issue sitting down and watching essentially any sport. Like, no matter what it is, if it's on, I can sit and watch it, especially with a group that's like into it, and it's fine. I don't have any problem doing that. As far as sports that I like actively seek out, yeah, I don't really watch a lot of football. Stop calling it soccer. But,
I love that.
But hockey is the sport I watch. You know that. I play hockey. It's funny you mentioned like the culture of the firms is so interesting, because like they'll get into these scraps and they all go to work the next day, and I gotta remind the guys I play hockey with sometimes that we're all going to work tomorrow, because sometimes the guys get a little they take it a little too seriously. You get people that start yelling and screaming and start trying to cause dust ups, and I'm like, I literally have to be at work in like 7 hours. Please stop. Like, I have other things to do.
My knees beg you. Let's get going.
There's 10 seconds left of this game, for the love of God.
Let's jump into the scenes of this movie now. And of course, we're going to start with the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, kick us off here. When is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene of Green Street Hooligans?
I gotta go with our final showdown here. I think that's definitely when like it's all hitting for me. I like the kind of build to this. Like, we had the big dust up at the bar where everything kind of went wrong. Steve is in the hospital. Pete realizes that this has to be settled once and for all with the other group, who is the NGO,
Millwall.
I think they are. Yeah, Millwall's group. And so he's right. This can't keep going. And so at this point, Charlie Hunnam and all of his guys are basically preparing for like the end all be all. Elijah Wood is contemplating if he leaves. Claire Forlani is going to go back to America. Like, this whole thing has gotten way out of control. And so they're all basically, we're at a crossroads, but Pete knows what needs to happen at this point. They set it up, and there's this big fight where this big kind of montage where they're all kind of forming as a group as they head towards this war for the final showdown. Do you happen to know what the song playing here by chance is, either one of you?
I don't. I was gonna bring up the music for sure, because we've seen a lot of fights in this movie, and there's usually like rock music or new metal and stuff, and they make a point to change the tone with the music for this last
that's what I was
fight.
going to point out. The song here, much more somber, much more melancholy as they kind of build to this, because this is not a, hey, we're all jazzed about the match fight. This is not a, hey, our team won and we're going to mess you guys up. Like, this is very much, this is personal. This is not, it's no longer about football at this point. This is Jeff Bell, who plays Tommy Hatcher from Millwall's group. He's got this vendetta against the Green Street Elite because his son got killed in one of their scraps. And that's part of why he stabs Steve in the neck, because he holds Steve accountable for that.
And so now this is literally like this is like a blood fight. This is a blood feud at this point. It's, your brother's in the hospital because I tried to kill him, and you guys actually killed my son. So this is it. This is finishing. So the soccer is gone at this point. This is two groups that are basically about to settle this. You don't inherently know going in necessarily that someone's going to die here, but it's definitely not off the table. And obviously this is what Elijah Wood realizes, that he needs to be with these guys. He can't leave this alone. And he runs up to join them. And then we have this big draw out fight. This song eventually does kind of hit into a solo, which is a little bit more fitting, but I love the music choice, the slow build here as we kind of ramp up to this fight. And then ultimately the fight itself is super brutal. Shannon ends up driving there because I guess she realizes that's where Matt probably is. They almost get caught in the scrap. They eventually get out, and that's when he actually does leave to go back to America with her. But just all of this, it's the perfect culmination of everything that this movie kind of been doing. This idea that despite being the Yank, Elijah Wood is part of this group and wants to be a part of this fight. It's Charlie Hunnam kind of assuming that leadership role even in his final moments and realizing that I can't run from this. I have to face this. And it's even the guy from Millwall's group, even kind of maybe being told some harsh truths that maybe he wasn't ready to hear. And I think that all of it works. I think it's a perfect climax to the events of this film. And it all works for me, top to bottom. And it is, I think, a very excellent way to cap this all off.
It looks like that song is One Blood by Terrence J. A quick Google
Nice.
Showed me. But I mean, this...
Great choice.
I might have to just agree with you. I really, really liked this movie. There's a lot of scenes I could throw out here, but this climax is really, it's perfect. And I like what you said, like all of the other fights in this movie, they seem gleeful to be doing it. Like it's what they want to be doing until they get, jumped at the bar. But otherwise, like that's kind of what they do. They protect their reputation. They humiliate other people. It's what they do is fight. But this last one feels like, okay, this is something we have to do. This is an obligation. This is serious. And that tone shift, which is illustrated, reflected perfectly in that somber song. And, I mentioned already earlier, all those shots of the various members of the firm getting ready at home, about to leave, just walking out of their everyday, ordinary lives, walking to this random beach to have this brawl. It's crazy because like I had never heard of firms, this soccer culture, and even now I don't know how much of this actually happens or not. I don't know. Maybe we can get around to that. But at the beginning, I'm just like Elijah Wood's character. I'm like, none of this makes any sense to me. I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand this culture. But by the end, I'm like, well, yeah, they have to do it. I mean, they were disrespected, and their brother, they have to do this. Like, I'm like Elijah Wood. I'm like, yeah, I couldn't walk away from that beach. And I love that his sister is like, back home, this reputation means nothing. Like, this means nothing. This is not important to anybody outside of this little bubble. And he's like, yeah, I get it, but he does it anyway. Like and like that obligation, that almost, I feel like, again, it's hard not to think about Fight Club because so much of this is based around violence, but like, I feel like everyone walking that beach is taking the punches means just as much as, I think Pete wants to get his ass kicked for what happened to his brother, but he also wants to inflict a ton of violence. It's a very sort of, I guess, a complicated thing there. But yeah, that going into it, I had no idea what was going to happen. Like you said, I was like, okay, yeah, somebody might die. They all might die. Like, I don't know like where this goes or where this escalates. And ultimately, I guess we should just say Pete, Charlie Hunnam's character, is killed. I think he knows what he's doing, kind of sacrifices himself so that Matt can get away by antagonizing the leader of the other group. the leader of the other group whose son was killed in a previous brawl. And he calls him out. He says, you're the one that killed your son. Like, he was 12 years old. He should have never been in this lifestyle. You should have protected him. It's your fault. He knows what's going to happen. And that guy beats him until he's no longer breathing. And that ends the fight. Everyone just kind of takes a step back and realizes, man, this has escalated far beyond soccer hooligan shenanigans. And, the movie has an epilogue after that. But yeah, this, I gotta agree. This is probably the best scene of the movie, and a perfect fitting end to ultimately very violent film.
Yeah. It's really funny because when I was first pitching the movie, that's obviously the scene that I always think about. Just that wet slapping punches on Pete, and just like. Especially Bova's dropkick. I was like thinking about Bova.
Dude, I haven't
dropkicking that dude.
I love that. That's my exact note. What did I write? I wrote okay, so Pete says to him, you want to make up for what you've done? Get my brother's family out of here. He just nods, takes off running, and like flies into frame, both feet, and just knocks that guy out. I just put on my notes, all caps, drop kick. Like, that's as somber and sad as this is. I literally went like, oh, like that was awesome.
That's it. That's especially for a wrestling fan like you. It's just like that's a good that's a good moment. But man, that song makes it so melancholic. It is a death march. They are literally. It is like the end of Gallipoli and having to run over the trenches. Like when they're just in their houses and they're hugging their partners. It's like this could be it. And I think it does escalate well from the previous encounter where they were in the most danger, which was the Manchester fight, where they were waiting at the train station and they'd been cottoned onto it by Dave, who was still wearing his pilot's outfit, and he's like, "Oh, they're all here waiting for you. You're not going to make it to the stadium. You're getting done in at the train station." And they have to, hit the emergency stop on the train and find a way in. And that I love that scene. That showed like the ingenuity and just like, sort of the guerrilla nature of this thing, but also just that implied, not just violence, the fact of like, we are literally putting our lives in danger for respect. And as exactly as Claire Filani says, for what? Like, no one cares outside of this tiny little bubble of people. Like, yes, it spreads around the other firms, as they said. Like, when we did that thing in Manchester, like, it spread like wildfire, like, about how the GSE was back. But again, it's like, so cool. You're cool to another bunch of thugs. It's like, that's it. So for me, coming back to this at 35 with 2 kids, and just being absolutely appalled by the violence. It is you already guessed my favorite scene is when Claire Filani comes into the hospital, and the thing with Pete is, like, he thinks he's like a likable rogue. He thinks he's Han Solo, but he's not. He's just a thug that is charming, a charming thug. I don't think that's a likable rogue. He stands up and it's like, oh, I'm going to go give her a hug kind of thing. But it's like, they don't have that relationship. And she just starts beating the shit out of him saying, you're sick. You're so sick. And again, he takes it. And that is my favorite scene. And then to see, Steve Dunham, like, neck, all messed up, taped up and stuff, and crying and apologizing to her, and she understands, but they just know it's over. And as I said, like, both of those characters, they may not be in that many scenes, but when they are together and it's real, man, that hits me so hard. Like, nothing hits me more than like a family breaking up. That's just that's peak for me.
I think this is a great pick.
It's tough to watch.
This is a really, really good scene. Very effective.
in trying to portray just kind of how dysfunctional this whole situation is. Obviously, Steve's character points out that like one of the conditions of like his entire relationship with his wife basically is that he doesn't go back to this. Like that. So, and literally he said that like the moment that kid passed away in one of their fights, like he's like, I haven't been to a match since. He's like, he doesn't go because he knows that it brings out the worst in him. And he's not even at that bar because he's trying to get back into it. He's at that bar because he's trying to save Matt from what he thinks is coming. And it's just a horrendous series of bad circumstances that is, as far as Claire Forlani, Shannon's character, is concerned, is only because of what Pete has done. And Pete realizes that that's not incorrect, basically. That's not, you know, an inaccurate statement. So the fact that he stands there and he just takes it, the fact that he just accepts it, like this is not, you know, there's no love here at this point. This is only disappointment, anger, frustration, all of the above. And it's powerful and it works. It's very effective. And because you would expect Pete to be like somebody who's like, oh, I'm not going to take this, but he takes it because there's no argument at that point. And you even contrast this scene with a little bit of the fact that we got Bava in there basically realizing what he's done, because his whole thing is he thought that he was blowing up this whole fake journalist that was hiding out amongst them, and he realizes that's not the case, but he still thinks that, you know, he still for some reason thinks that all the Millwall guys are going to do is rough these guys up, and before he has any realization what he's actually done, it's spiraled out of control. So you've got that character's anguish kind of in the background of this, where he realizes that in his short-sightedness, he has escalated something far further than it ever would. Because your brain tells you that, like, the climax of this film is going to be the West Ham Millwall match. Like, your brain's like, oh, well, that's clearly got to be where this caps off. We're going to have a big old fight, and that's going to be it. And no, it's these two scenes kind of back to back that really bring this movie home. And I think together they are very effective. But that scene on its own that you're talking about is definitely one of the more powerful moments in the film.
Yeah, as much as I talked about Leo Gregory as Bova being, just looks like a real scrapper, real tough dude. You're right. He goes to the rival gang's leader, Tommy Hatcher, we should say, played by Jeff Bell, who I think is phenomenal in this role. And he sicks them onto the firm, thinking that they're just going to go after Matt because he's a journalist. They don't care about that. Tommy Hatcher just sees an opportunity to finally get revenge on the major, and dude, they light the bar on fire. He confronts him. Steve's trying to say his name right, Steve. Did I get that right? Yeah, Steve.
Steve Dunham.
Steve's trying to tell him, like, I'm out. I want nothing to do with this. I'm sorry what happened to your son. Like, and Tommy's not having it. He walks up and he stabs him in the neck with a broken bottle. And like, when that happens, like, I've got hands on my head. I'm like, this movie just escalated to a whole other level. Like, it's been fist fights and brawls, and now it's like murder. And he tells him, like, if you die tonight, then we'll be even. This real cold stuff, leaves him on the ground. And I think, he's dead. He's got stabbed in the throat. He barely survives it, and the movie goes on to the scenes that we talked about already. But yeah, this movie just it takes a turn where, halfway through, like, it's violent throughout, but like, I'm having a blast. I'm having fun.
Like, yeah.
I'm enjoying this world. I'm drinking my beer. But after this point, like, it just like the characters in the movie, you're like, oh, this got serious. This means something else. This is like life or death. And it's like this little magic trick this movie plays. Like, just like the character of Matt, we sort of get sucked into the fun, intoxicating nature of it, not realizing it's only going to escalate and escalate and escalate until some horrible things happen, and they do.
Yeah.
It's a... oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that with Bova's character, like, obviously he plays the Judas role very well. He's quick to make a reaction and just go full nuclear, even after the first run in with Matt and being like, oh man, you guys are, attached to the hip and give gay slurs or whatever it is that he wants to throw out there. And then he goes to Millwall, and it's like, it's almost like he wants to get the shit beaten out of him just so he can feel something, like, or feel some sort of connection, because he already, gets set up, is like, oh, I'm going to betray them. But I am always glad of like that Boromir moment, of actual some sort of amount of redemption to come back and be like, I know I fucked up completely, and we, this won't get repaired. But when he shows up, it actually counts, and the fact that that's the thing, he does save Elijah Wood's family's lives in those final moments.
And I kind of lost my point I was building up to earlier, but as much as I talked about Leo Gregory looking so scrappy, his scene in the hospital where he's just like in shambles, shamed at what he'd done, knowing he can't change it, like, we're seeing a whole new layer to this performance. And that night he gets drunk in a public park, singing songs by himself, crying himself to sleep. And in the scene where they're all getting ready for the final brawl, we see everyone else leaving their house, leaving their day jobs. He wakes up at a park bench. Like, I don't think we ever see his home life. I don't know if he has a home. He might just couch surf.
We see him at a job at one point, because when they announce the Millwall match, you basically see all of them at their jobs, which is just another cool little ripple I like with this, the fact that they have lives outside.
Yeah.
Like the Millwall guy works at like an auto shop or something, like, and so he's sitting at like a desk with like a headset on. So, some sort of monotonous job, like a call center or something is what it looks like. But, but even then, like, it's not thrilling work, shall we say. You're not exactly, super fulfilled doing that. But, like a lot of these guys, they're saying goodbye to girlfriends, to wives, to whatever. He's passed out on a bench because the weight of what he's done is bothering him that much. Like, he realizes that this entire situation, at least in this immediate moment, is his fault. Like, Steve, the leader of this gang that he's idolized for years, is fighting for his life in the hospital because of him. Like, they're going to have this knockdown, drag out brawl because of him. Like, this became a blood feud essentially, and it's his fault. And I think he sells that kind of tragedy. I think he sells that kind of tragedy very well. And I won't say, in that regard, like, the notion of finding out where a character like that ends up 20 years later actually is an interesting notion to me. So I don't know if that's what the intention that he has for his kind of Green Street 2 script would be. But I think there is an interesting way to look at a character like this years later and see, what does this do to you? Where do you land? But yeah, the performance that Leo Gregory gives, I think, is very, very good. Chris, I want to run a lookalike by you for Leo Gregory.
For Leo Gregory, okay.
I was watching this movie, and I look at pictures of him, especially now, and I thought he might be Joel Kinnaman.
Joel Kinnaman. Let's see.
Yeah, I can say it.
Joel Kinnaman is whenever Leo Gregory's character sees what his life could have been if he never drank alcohol.
And worked out every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, that sounds like we're acknowledging a similarity there. So
there's something there.
It was the picture on Leo Gregory's Wikipedia of him like now. Like the one that's on there, that was the one where like I looked at it and was like, Joel Kinnaman there, bro. Sorry, bruv. Got to get my slang right here. Bruv.
I'm gonna annoy the heck out of friend of the show, my wife, for all the stupid catchphrases and words that I have gonna undoubtedly pick up from this movie and say for like a month straight, like bruv. Or I love this line. One of the guys in the gang says, after they chase off some guys, he's panting, goes, I'm getting too old for this shit. Seriously, I could use a beer and a lie down. And like, after work every day, I could use a beer and a lie down. That's gonna be my go-to for sure. I love any time the movie seems to go out of its way at times to really drive home the fact that this culture, like you're talking about, is a bubble. Like, it is only important to the people involved in this scene. And there's times where, like, they bump against, like, everyday people in public. Like, Pete's explaining to Matt, what a firm is. And he's, Matt's asking him questions, like, almost too loud for Pete's liking. He's like, oh, like a gang? He's like, shh, keep it down, because there's people around. Those people don't care. They're waiting in line to buy a newspaper. No one cares. There's that great scene where they're, like, on the train, and he's explaining sort of, firms and the culture and everything. And in the middle of, talking about all this violent stuff, like, this old man, like, gives him a glance, like, they're just punk thugs. He wants nothing to do. He's not scared of them. He doesn't care about this culture. He's just like, what are these trash people? But in that same scene, Pete sees a woman carrying some bags, and he stands up and gives her his seat, which just is a great character moment for Pete, where we see this guy break bones and teeth, but yeah, he's gonna give the lady a seat on a train. Like, he's not an animal. Like, he does what he does out of perhaps a misguided, but out of like a code, out of a respect thing, like out of reasoning. It's not senseless violence to him. It's what his job is, his hobby. Like, I don't know how exactly they look at what they do in the firm, but it's there's rules to this thing. They're not just senselessly
it's like there's
violent people.
It's like there's a time and place. Like, there's a time and place for the firm scraps, and that's not on the bus. So you still cordial human being. You show some decency. You show some respect. Like, because these people aren't part of this. They're not part of this world. They're not part of this culture. They're not part of any of it. And there was a little bit of that Jurassic Park when, like, he was like, so the GSC, and he's like, lower your voice. It reminded me a little bit of the Jurassic Park. Dodson, we got Dodson here. See, nobody cares. Like, just that idea that, like, nobody actually, it's a blood feud. Like, or the feuds between the firms are, like, in their heads only, basically. Like, that's where the feud exists. The rest of the world largely just doesn't care. And it's, at least that's kind of the vibe I get from it. It may be a little bit different there, but, like, even when Elijah Wood is talking about, like, everybody knew who I was now, it's mostly people in the firm. Like, it's people that are in the firms. It's not like regular people have any idea who Elijah Wood is now. So it's this interesting culture.
It is funny how the firm paints, like, the media and stuff, and gets really upset about, everything that they talk about, and they're lying and all that sort of stuff. And that's, like, the whole conspiracy of the film. But the fact that Pete does, like, knock over a telephone booth in the like intro sequence,
objectively causing property damage.
Yeah, exactly. And then Matt's walking up the stairs, like, the next day from the tube, and it's like, holy shit! Like, was there a freaking riot, or, like, was there a terrorist attack? Yeah,
that's what it says. Yeah. It's wild because it is that thing. Well, and it kind of speaks more to just, like, how they view themselves, because they don't view themselves as, like, hooligans. They don't view themselves as people who are just recklessly causing trouble. Like, they're standing up for their team and fighting for their group, and, like, it's a respect thing. And it's like, they say at one point, like, even on the losing end, it's about showing up, because if you don't show up, then you're a coward. So, like, that, at the beginning of the movie, after that first match, it's like 6-on-30, and they still run into the fight until the backup shows up, because it's not about winning or losing the scrap. It's about being in the scrap. Like, you point out to that thing about, like, I think throughout the whole movie, there's this idea that it's not just about beating these guys up, but it's about taking the hits and about coming back for the next fight. It's not about, like, you're going to lose a scrap every now and then, but you come back for the next one, and that's the whole point. And it is wild. It's interesting to think about, just as the way the characters present that and the way they kind of view it in their head, which is largely, I won't quite say it's a delusion of grandeur, but it matters a lot more to them, and matters almost completely to them more than anybody else. But for them, that's a code. It's a specific thing. And it is, for some of these guys, all they have. So when people like Bova betray that, it's a heavy weight, because, he thought he was doing the right thing and thought he was making the right move, and then found out, no, I've actually just made everything worse. So it's made almost more interesting by the fact that this is all so pointless isn't the right word, I guess, because for some of these guys, it's very much a serious thing. But like you said, outside of the soccer world, And outside of the firms, none of this matters really. But to them, it's everything.
100%. I love in the first scene that is like, well, not the first scene for Matt experiencing violence. There's so much fear because he is the audience surrogate, and just like, everyone's walked down the streets like at night or in the afternoon, and it's just like you're walking in a rough neighborhood, and you're just like, man, I don't know about this. And then he gets bailed up and almost given a Chelsea grin, which is pretty, like, the moment credit card goes in his mouth and you can already see he's cut his lips.
Was he gonna punch the card into his mouth? Is that what?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's where I assumed it was going. I was relieved that he got saved, because that was
exactly. And so
having
that's
like American History X flashbacks.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Definitely gives that put your teeth on the curb kind of feeling, that very unease. But and then that instant sense of camaraderie when they all come in. You get the freaking ride at the Rohirrim. Whenever the bigger amount of group comes in like the GSE, it's like, thank God, because someone could have died. Right. But yeah, so then when it is that stand-up fight between 50 versus 50, it's like, yeah, this is it. This is the death knell here. Yeah.
I love this character moment for Pete where, again, he's, showing Matt the ropes early in the movie, and he mentions that he's a history teacher, and Matt's shocked. He's like, "You're a teacher?" And Pete just says, "Mate, I'm smart as fuck." Like, and we see him like with his students and like, teaching them soccer and stuff. And it's, like in the real world, like he's just he's an everyday guy. I love that delivery on that line though. It's so good.
So good. Yeah.
And then I love Matt really endears himself to the rest of the firm, I think. The scene where you're talking about earlier, where the other firm are waiting for them at the train station. So they hit the emergency stop button. They get off the train early and they sneak up to him. And Matt's the one that hatches the plan to drive up in a delivery truck into the group of them. And Matt's in the front seat, and he's already American, has an American accent, but he really plays it up for this little ruse when he says, yeah, we're with Paramount Pictures shooting the new Hugh Grant film. Like, he just really lays it on thick that, he is not from around there. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, any decent chicks in there?" He goes, "Oh, Cameron Diaz, I think." And they let him through. And, of course, in the back of the truck is the firm and the GSE. And they jump out and start the brawl. It's great. But, Matt hatching that plan, putting himself on the line and just kind of saving their asses, I think is what endears them to everyone beyond Pete, at that point.
Yeah. That and to Mr. Miyagi as well. You gotta give it up to Mr. Miyagi for laying the foundation there.
It's based on a real person,
Yeah.
Because the Karate Kid is based off Matt. Like, these are facts, man. I do want to shout out, we've mentioned most of the main cast, but a very, very young Rafe Spall shows up as Swill, a member of the GSE, and I'm a huge fan of Rafe from things like Hot Fuzz or
Hot Fuzz for sure.
Small part in Shaun of the Dead. He oddly enough plays a character called Milburn in Prometheus. Big Short, Jurassic World, all the stuff. Alum of the show.
Alum of the show.
Men in Black International. And Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Did we talk about that one too? Don't remember.
We did Jurassic World month, Jurassic Park month, so we had to have. Yeah, we did.
We must have, yeah. So anyway, he's great. I'm never sad when he's on my screen, but seeing him here as like a baby, he's like 20 when this movie's shot, 21. This is right after Shaun of the Dead, I think, or right around the same time. And so he's Shaun of the Dead is 04, this is 05. So like he's very, very young. And of course, in this movie, everyone's a baby. It's odd that like the most seasoned actor in this movie is Elijah Wood, who looks like everybody else looks like they have 20 years more mileage on them than Elijah Wood does. But but his performance especially, it's all just mostly just jumping around, gritting his teeth, getting into the scraps. But I love it.
I wanted to pull back a little bit and just talk about like the look and feel of this movie, it feels so raw in like such a genuine way, not ham-fisted, not really shoving it down your throat. Like it just feels there's a lot of handheld camera shots, almost documentary feel to some of the camera shots. It feels so ground level, feels so grounded. It's got sort of a muted color palette without being all washed out. Again, it's not over the top. Like it hits that line just right. And gotta shout out Lexi Alexander, director of this movie, alum of the show. We talked about her Punisher Warzone. This is pretty much the movie that gets her the gig of Punisher Warzone. And I mean, we got to talk about her, in the intro of this podcast and previously, but just an ultimate badass. She's so cool, trained martial artist, awesome director, and she, back when I was on Twitter, she was a good Twitter follow. I mean, she is constantly sticking up for human rights and just seems like an all-around great person. But I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but I am surprised. It's almost shocking that a woman directed this, and I'm trying to be careful because I'm not saying like I'm surprised a woman could, but this feels like a very
masculine,
like I said, masculine,
heavy movie.
Yeah, like this is what a man is like, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I think she's probably the reason, in large part, why I think this movie ages so much better than something like Boondock Saints. There's so much more nuance here. All the stuff we talk about, like with the bubble and how like this movie isn't trying to tell you to glorify these people. Like these aren't the people to glorify. Like there is flaws in their plan. I mean, the nuanced take to the violence, I think you can credit to her in large part. But at the same time, whenever the movie's violent, whenever there's scenes, when there's fight scenes, like it's shot really well. The violence is awesome. It looks really good. Like she knows how to stage an action set piece, and it's just I'm not at all surprised that she got so much more work because of this small movie.
She has a movie in the can that hasn't been released yet, and that just drives me nuts.
Damn. There's definitely that, sort of green grass, the handy cam sort of stuff, but you definitely can see the action a lot better. But I do love that as well. Like, and saying that she's a martial artist and stuff like that is good because it carries that when you've got your nerdy Elijah Wood coming in for his first swings and he's doing these actual haymakers, like actually like just swinging arms, and then the fact that after the fight they're all laughing and carrying on, and then it's just saying like those first few punches you threw a little bit,
a little girly.
Yeah, a little girly. Yep.
Well, and I like that scene too because like there's this big fight that's about to happen, and Charlie Hunnam's like, "Get up and fight." He's like, "I don't know how to fight." He's like, "Just think of somebody you hate." And he thinks of obviously the guy who got him thrown out of Harvard, and then later he explains to Charlie Hunnam what this guy did, and I don't know if I have the exact quote.
I would have kicked the out of him.
Like there's something about shades in there though.
That's right.
It's like a really, it's like I would have. Oh man, it's gonna drive me nuts.
Yeah, it's shades of or something. It's that's. Got to get it right.
We'll get the quote.
Get it right. I think it's 7 shades of out of him. That's what he's gonna do. And that is such a delightfully, needlessly specific phrase that apparently the 7 shades thing is I don't know. There's apparently a story there, but I don't know. If he's done that to me, I'd have beat the 7 shades. Excuse me. Try saying 7 shades of 6 times fast. But it says, if he's done that to me, I'd have beat the 7 shades of out of him. And I love that there's, this idea that the movie starts with him just like even his dad, like Elijah Wood's dad tells him, he's like, we could have fought this. Like, he just, and I get it. The whole point is to portray him as this kind of, pushover. This guy that just kind of sits down and takes it. And the whole point of being in this culture is it teaches him to not do that. It teaches him that he's got to take pride in at least himself, if nothing else. And so I like that, again, the arc that character takes and kind of learns by the end and brings it full circle at the end when he gets a confession out of this guy and is going to use that to get back to Harvard. 2 months shy of graduation. You're telling me Harvard's never had a cocaine scandal before? Come on.
Again, going back on the director and how the film is shot, I was shocked because I was thinking, this is probably a decently rough, high B movie, B grade sort of movie, but like there are some beautiful shots in this film, like just like camera positioning and stuff, or like even when Elijah Wood's just waiting for his baggage at the airport, and he's just framed really well, and there's like an arrow like pointing towards him and stuff, and there's just like some really specifically beautiful frames. Especially again, we've brought it up a million times, but that precursor to the violence of everyone, like the montage of everyone just in their houses, prepping themselves, and it's not like the Eye of the Tiger's playing or anything. We're very somber. Like that is just. Yeah, it may not be a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but that scene alone is pretty freaking amazing.
There was one, you were talking about the shots. There's one I don't know that it's the Man United Stadium behind them when they're fighting at the wharf. I just wanted to see what stadium that was.
They were playing at home, so they were playing at West Ham. So it would have been
West Ham,
nearby.
I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
It's American, dumb American.
Dumb American. Is it Man U Stadium? I just wanted to make sure.
But yeah, it's a cool looking stadium, with sort of like that pavilion dome and stuff.
It might be their old stadium. So West Ham old. Well, in this case, it looks way cooler. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know specifically what stadium it is. Don't hate me, football fans. But I just love that notion of like when they're walking into this final scrap, they've got at this wharf on the water. There's this big stadium, I guess it really doesn't matter what stadium it is. It's this big, glorious football stadium. Might even be Wembley for all I know. But it's just this ultimate statement that, like, it's there's a bunch of levels you can look at it. One is that you could see that like the stadium is in the background, which means that for this fight, the stadium is, and the soccer in general is quite literally beyond the point at this point. But just the visual of that being the backdrop, because it is the backdrop of this whole thing. The whole premise of this fight, the whole premise of this movie, the whole premise of everything is literally based off of this intense loyalty to a specific soccer team. Which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but it's but just that final shot of like the stadium as we kind of all walk up to this final fight, I think is just extremely poignant, and like I said, I think it looks really, really good.
I had a great time with this movie. I like I said earlier, like I don't know if I ever would have got around to watching it had you not brought it to us, Steven. But ever since, I mean, probably our Punisher Warzone episode, I know we specifically talked about this movie sort of putting Lexi Alexander on the map, and I had an interest in going back to watch it, but we covered Punisher Warzone like 2 years ago, and I never watched it these 2 years. I probably never would have got around to it, but I'm so glad that I have. Had an absolute great time with it, man. This guest month, we're getting all kinds of picks from our guests, and I'm loving it. So, Steven, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing the movie. And please, by all means, for people that maybe want to hear your voice some more, let them know where they can do that. What you got going on over there?
So I'm Steven. I'm from the Great Game Debate podcast. We get together every second week usually, and just have silly debates about video games, whether it's like the super serious or the absolutely benign sort of stuff. We like to chop it up. We also have a massive greatest games of all time list that we've been curating with different themes. It's the GGD list. But yeah, we're mostly lighthearted video game podcast. We're not recycling the news. We're just hanging out, chatting about all the games we've played during our lives or are playing currently. And yeah, we get a bunch of guests on. We love everyone that comes on and shares their video game stories. And yeah, so that's where we are over at the Great Game Debate or GGD. But yeah, if you look up Great Game Debate on all podcast services and YouTube, you'll find us and check us out.
So much positivity, it sickens me.
Very fun and active Discord server as well. Recommend joining that, where you can weigh in on the debates on the show. Like I said, Andrew and myself have been on previously. People listening to our show have hopefully heard that appearance, but I got the guest on a while back to represent Arkham Asylum. It was Arkham Asylum versus Arkham City, and I stood up for Asylum being the better of the two movies. How did that turn out? Go over there, tune in, and listen. But I was pretty happy with the argument I was able to put up there. But no, I love the show. It's a good time. It's just a great concept. You guys get so much out of that concept, and it's good stuff. So be sure you check it out, tune in, and yeah, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We are podcasting with positivity.
All right, Andrew, I got to be honest here. I think we probably covered it during the episode, but I really like this movie. Like I certainly my first thought is like, man, if I had saw this like in high school, it would rank probably pretty high on either all-time list for me or nostalgic list for me. But even coming to it later in life, I'm gonna watch it again. This was a great time, and I'm certainly gonna be recommending this around to some people that I know would also love it.
Yeah, for sure. I messaged a friend of mine that's a big soccer fan, and I was like, man, everybody in... I mentioned specifically because she's a big fan of Rafe Spall, and I was like, man, he's a baby in this movie. And she texted me back, and she was like, everyone's a baby in this movie because it's just all these people are around now, and there's just these so much different to see them now versus then. And then so, yeah, I'm definitely gonna probably go back. I'm definitely probably gonna go back to this one. So, but yeah, this I had
your
I had
friend
a good time
that is a soccer fan, football fan.
Football fan.
Had they already seen the movie? Were they familiar with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I imagine it's much more
No,
common if
yeah.
you follow the sport, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, Andrew, so far this month has been a blast and pretty easy, which is not a bad thing. I'm having a great time. Why don't we do this all the time? Why don't we have guests every week and bring us
Folks,
movies that they love?
All next year. Next year, all fans, all the time.
Honestly, this was kind of a nightmare to put together, so we're not going to do that, but I am going to enjoy it while it lasts. And in fact, I have right here in front of me yet another gift, Andrew. My God, they just keep coming. So let's meet up next week. Let's open this up and discuss whatever movie's in here with the guest that sent it over. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Hey, Andrew. Got any Christmas decorations out?
No. But
Okay.
by the time this airs, maybe.
Maybe. Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep that going. Come back next week, and just remember, maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song, and a special thank you to Brittany Rochelle for singing our holiday version of our theme song. Thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for that SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. We're going to sync our audio, so we're going to do that by counting up to 6, alternating numbers. I'll go first, then Andrew, then Steven. 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4, 5, 6. Andrew always takes a drink as soon as I say we're gonna. All right, here we go. 1.
2.
2. Oh, I
Hang
do
on.
too.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I was looking at
No
Discord
worries.
pictures. I'm sorry. I was looking at the Discord pictures.
It's fine. You just made our post credit.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. 1,
2.
3.